Start rock, news, talk, and classic rock. 103.9 WLPO.
March 21, Rod Thorson, 103.9 WLPO, the most important radio station in north central Illinois. We're pleased to welcome Andy Hale, who's the attorney for the Uyghur family and supporters. I want to make sure I'm accurate about this. You've been retained by the family and supporters of Chester Uyghur, Andy?
Well, no, I'm actually Chester's attorney, not the Texas attorney.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. You're Chester's attorney. And I know that you've been, and by the way, thanks for being on the show. I was, pleased to see you on the docuseries by our good friend, our mutual friend, David Rakulia.
You as well.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Yeah, we were happy to oblige because it's been a case that was talked about around here a lot. Let me start here. This is maybe an interesting place to start. Even for a person like me, who feels like the court got the case right, I have to tell you, at the end of this third docuseries segment, when you won the opportunity to do DNA analysis, I sat there watching that, and I smiled, and I was happy for you.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't think I'm the only person that feels that way, even if, you're a person like me who happens to feel like the court got it right 60 years ago or more or less. I was happy for you that you were able to do that today. And so I guess we'd start there and just start with the status of the case. I know you've had a couple of podcasts that have been out since early this month. And you've been talking with is it Charlotte? Whitney. You've been talking with Whitney Braun.
Yeah.
About the case a little bit more. Where are we at right now, Andy?
Yeah, well, let me say this. You saw on the HBO show, there's a segment where I asked Dave Rakulia, I said, what do you think your dad would say about DNA testing now? And if you remember, Dave says, I'm absolutely positive he would be for it, I don't see how you couldn't be for it. We can debate, the evidence being tested, but I don't see how anybody could be against trying to forensically try to figure things out. So we submitted 8 pieces of evidence to a lab in Virginia, hairs found on the victims, cigarette butts, some twine. That testing is going on as we speak, and we're supposed to get the results probably by, I think end of April, sometime in May. And we will take it one step at a time. But I was really glad that the court allowed us to do that, and I think that's probably the best way to try to get some insight into the case.
If you could, in your legal career, have you been involved in other cases where DNA analysis was used and helped in one way or another? And if so, can you tell us what that was?
Yeah, I have. My practice, ironically, has historically been and continues to be retained by the City of Chicago as outside counsel representing the City of Chicago or Chicago police officers when they get sued in civil rights cases. So I'm usually on the defense side. I had a case, it was a 1982 rape of a woman in Chicago. A woman was walking to a parking garage, guy threw her in the trunk of a car, raped her. The parking lot attendants saw this guy driving her car out of the garage. They wouldn't let the gate up. He got out and he ran. They gave a description to police. A guy gets brought into the police station. He's identified, convicted, goes to prison for 26 years. And then they did DNA later, and it exonerated him. And he sued a bunch of police officers saying he shouldn't have been arrested. We actually won the case because the witnesses simply got it wrong. The police didn't do anything wrong. But my point is, this poor guy spent 26 years in prison for a rape that, the DNA came back to another guy who was like a serial rapist. So, yeah, I've seen it, and it's powerful when it can basically solve a crime.
It does happen then. It does happen.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
In your career, now I don't want to age you or date you, but you've had a couple of decades of
that's all right.
a couple of decades of experience doing this?
3. Well, I've been a lawyer for over 30 years. I graduated law school from the University of Illinois in 1987, so you can date me. That's fine.
Well, yeah, I kind of figured we were similar in age. So my question is this: what differences do you see in DNA analysis today than you saw in maybe your first experience a couple of decades ago?
Well, first of all, initially there wasn't even DNA. I mean, it couldn't be done in these old cases.
Yeah.
They didn't have the technology to do it. Now what I've seen is you can get results on a lot less genetic material. I mean, it's incredible the advancement that has taken place in terms of the techniques and the ability to obtain results, and so that's what's really fascinating. The science is just evolving every year, and I just think it's a great way. You see a lot of cases in the news now that are old cases where if there's evidence preserved, things are being tested, and, DNA is being used to basically try to see if the court got things right, and so I think it's a really powerful tool that should be used when it can.
Well, let me cut right to maybe the most direct and challenging and hard question I can find for you in my own mind, and that is this. Do you expect to find Mr. Uyghur's DNA on those samples? And even if so, is there even a chance, a remote chance, that this DNA evidence could clear Mr. Uyghur of his conviction? Or is that even remotely something that you could hope for? Or are we just looking for something else that could cast some suspicion that maybe somebody else had something to do with it?
Well, that's a good question. So I think the answer is I do not expect to find any Chester Uyghur DNA on the items we submitted. I do think if the DNA does not come back to him on any of these 8 items, I can guarantee you this, I will be making the case that his conviction should be vacated. That case will be stronger, obviously, if the DNA can be matched to somebody else, somebody who maybe could be identified as a known suspect at the time. That would be really powerful. So, we're not really going to know the strength of those arguments and what the arguments are until we get the results. But does it have that potential? Absolutely, yes.
This is Andy Hale, by the way. He's Chester Uyghur's attorney, and he has won the right to send off for DNA testing 8, as he indicates, 8 pieces of evidence. So then my next question is the evidence that's being tested specifically for other people's DNA or just anything other than Chester's?
Another good question. Right now, it's just being compared to Chester's DNA and the victim's DNA. But DNA can be submitted to databases, so it could be submitted into databases and compared, and I think it will be automatically, to see if it hits with somebody else who's already in a database. If it doesn't come back to Chester Uyghur and there's no database hit, I will still likely ask for a round 2, which would be, there's a lot of hair samples of known suspects that have been collected. Gerald Nemke, George Spiros, other people. We could compare it to those people. I would really encourage you and your listeners to check out my podcast, The Starved Rock Murders with Andy Hale, where we get into a lot of information. I'm posting documents on the podcast website.
I'll endorse that too. By the way, I've spent some time on it. It's a nice podcast and it's fascinating.
AndyHalePodcast.com, where I'm being very transparent. I mean, when I talk about things, I'm posting the documents on the podcast website. You can go look at them yourself.
Right.
So when I say, a certain thing happened, or George Spiros said this in an interview, or they found red fibers, or this and that. I mean, I'm posting the documents on AndyHalePodcast.com, and people can check it out. And I think, to your point about you think the court got it right, I understand everybody's got their own opinion, and I get it. But here's my but. Most people out there, I'd say 99% of the people out there, are making their determinations, one way or the other, guilt or innocence, based on very little or no information. Anecdotally, what somebody may have told you, what you read in paper. I mean, that's the only way you can do it. But what I'm trying to do with the podcast is, and we've got 4 episodes out with about 5 or 6 to go, is to really educate people, provide more facts, more information, so people can learn more and see more and have a more educated opinion, because I think it's going to be a real eye-opener when people see and learn a lot more about the case that they did not know.
I agree with that from what I've seen. I haven't seen every minute or heard every minute of your podcast, but I agree that, and I'll plead guilty to this. I have made my decision, and I've come to my conclusions based on exactly what you said. The available information that we had, and I didn't ignore any of it. It's just what's available.
Well, can I say one other thing too?
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
What we now know in 2022. Okay, we now know that false confessions is real. We can debate how often they happen, but it's absolutely real. We did a documentary movie about it called A Murder in the Park, about the false confession of a guy named Al Story Simon. I would encourage you to watch that. I'll give you another example. Google Kevin Fox, who confessed to sexually assaulting and killing his daughter, Riley Fox.
I remember that
case. Turned out to be a false confession. Yeah, so my point is, in 1960, right, when Chester Weger confessed, I'm using air quotes, and got convicted, nobody understood that there was this concept of false confession, It just simply wasn't something people thought about. So I think most people who are in the Chester's guilty camp are basing it on the confession. And I get it. And what I'm trying to do with my podcast is explain why people falsely confess, but more importantly, get into a lot of the facts in the case that I think support the case that he's innocent. And I really encourage you, listen to my episode that's coming out on Thursday. I'm going to talk about premeditation. I think you're going to find it really interesting. So I really enjoyed doing it, and we've gotten a great response. People have really enjoyed it.
I know there have been thousands of downloads. I'm planning on taking it in on Thursday. So let me ask you this last question, and then I want you to go through the exact spot to find that podcast. Let's just say, hypothetically, you get your way, you move to vacate, and it happens. Is that the end of it? There's still two other victims. He's not been charged with the murder of those two other victims. And what we know today, or what you may find out through your DNA analysis, do you think any prosecutor would prosecute him successfully today?
No, I think there's zero chance of that. If his conviction's vacated, no. I mean, that would mean that his DNA is not at the crime scene, so there'd be nothing linking him to any of the victims. There'd be zero chance of that. I will say this. I mean, it's not going to be up to me. The DNA result's going to come back. If everything goes my way, if everything breaks my way, the first step is me going to the Will County State's Attorney's Office and making my case that the conviction should be vacated. They can agree or disagree. If they agree, great, the conviction's vacated. If they don't, I'm going to have to go to court and fight. And that's what I've had to do so far. I've had to fight to look at the evidence, just to look at it. I had to fight to get it tested. So this has been an uphill battle for us. And, I'm going to continue to fight for Chester because I believe in his innocence, but I think we've made great strides by being able to look at, analyze, and test the physical evidence. And then I also think the podcast has done a great job of putting facts out there that people simply weren't aware of,
True.
And letting people know there's a lot more to the story.
Andy, just like the docuseries from David Rakulia, this story still has a ton of intrigue. So if a listener right now, they haven't heard of your podcast, haven't visited the Spotify or any of the sites that are carrying it, what's the best way to get on the computer and find and download that podcast and start in?
I think the easiest way is to go to my podcast website, AndyHalePodcast.com.
Andy, Hale podcast.com.
Yeah. AndyHale podcast.com. You can actually listen to the episodes right there. We post all the documents for each episode right there that we refer to, and then it has links to Apple, Spotify, wherever people get podcasts. That's the easiest way, and I encourage people, no matter what your view is, check it out. I think you'll enjoy it. I think you'll find it interesting and enlightening.
Oh, I already have, and I appreciate that. And if you would, I would love to be one of the first in line to talk to you when and if that DNA evidence comes back, no matter what the result is. You are always welcome here. I'm happy to have gotten to know you. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. I'll stay in touch.
Attorney Andy Hale, Chester Weger's attorney, waiting the DNA evidence, the DNA analysis of the evidence. It's 929, 1039 WLPO. Number's 815-223-3093, the number to call or text.
Rod Thorson on 1039 WLPO.
Think spring and savings with the spring